The world knew Muhammad Ali as the greatest, the charismatic heavyweight champion who floated like a butterfly and stung like a bee. But behind the gloves and the glory lay secrets so profound that his own family fought to keep them buried forever. If you're ready to discover the untold truth about one of history's most iconic figures, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Your support helps us bring these incredible stories to light. Don't forget to click the hype button. It's crucial for helping our content reach more people who deserve to hear these amazing stories. Drop a comment below and let's build this community together. Louisville, Kentucky, 1942. The humid summer air hung heavy over the predominantly African-American neighborhood where Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. took his first breath. What the birth certificate didn't record, what the newspapers would never print, was the conversation that took place between his parents, Cassius Sr. and Odessa, in the dimly lit hospital room that night. Odessa clutched her newborn son, tears streaming down her face, not from joy, but from a fear that would haunt the Clay family for decades. "He can never know," she whispered to her husband, her voice barely audible above the distant sounds of the hospital corridor. "Promise me, Cassius. He can never know about his real father." The secret that Odessa carried wasn't just about infidelity. It was about survival in 1940s Kentucky, where the wrong bloodline could mean the difference between life and death. The man listed as the father on young Cassius's birth certificate was indeed Cassius Sr., a sign painter and occasional preacher who had agreed to raise the boy as his own. But the biological father was someone whose identity would shake the very foundations of everything the world thought it knew about Muhammad Ali. Dr. William Henderson was one of Louisville's most prominent physicians, a white man whose clandestine relationship with Odessa had begun when she worked as a domestic helper in his mansion on the affluent side of town. In an era where such relationships were not just socially taboo but legally dangerous, their affair had produced a child whose mixed heritage would remain hidden beneath the surface of his African-American identity. The physical evidence was there for those who knew what to look for. Young Cassius possessed an unusual combination of features, the sharp jawline and piercing eyes that seemed almost European, combined with the athletic build and natural rhythm that spoke to his African heritage. But in the segregated South, no one dared to ask questions that might uncover such dangerous truths. As Cassius grew, the weight of this secret began to manifest in ways that his family couldn't have predicted. His mother, Odessa, became increasingly protective, almost obsessively so. She would watch him with an intensity that neighbors found unsettling, as if she were constantly afraid that someone might discover what she was hiding. This maternal anxiety translated into a complex relationship with her son, one moment smothering him with affection, the next pushing him away when his features reminded her too strongly of the forbidden love that had created him. The young boy sensed this tension without understanding its source. He began acting out, seeking attention through increasingly bold and sometimes reckless behavior. At age 6, he would climb to the roof of their modest home on Grand Avenue and shout to the neighborhood that he was going to be famous someday. His mother would rush outside, panic in her eyes, begging him to come down, not because she feared he might fall, but because she feared he might be seen, really seen, by the wrong people. Cassius Sr., the man who had chosen to be a father to this child, struggled with his own demons. He loved the boy fiercely, but the constant reminder of his wife's betrayal ate away at him like acid. He began drinking heavily, and when he drank, the carefully constructed facade of their family life would crack, revealing glimpses of the pain beneath. Late at night, young Cassius would lie in his bed, listening to his parents argue in hushed, desperate tones. "He's getting too big, too noticeable," his father would say. "People are starting to ask questions." "What do you want me to do?" his mother would respond, her voice breaking. He's just a child. He's not just any child, Odessa. Look at him. Really look at him. How long do you think we can keep this up? These conversations, overheard through thin walls, planted seeds of confusion and insecurity in young Cassius's mind. He began to understand that there was something different about him, something that made his parents afraid, but he couldn't grasp what it was. This uncertainty would drive him to seek validation and recognition in ways that would shape his entire future. The turning point came when Cassius was 12 years old. His red Schwinn bicycle, a prized possession that represented freedom and independence, was stolen from outside the Columbia Auditorium where he had gone to enjoy the annual Louisville Home Show. The theft itself was traumatic enough for any child, but for Cassius it represented something deeper, a violation of the one thing in his life that was purely his own, untainted by the secrets and tensions that surrounded his family. Furious and determined to find the thief, he stormed into the basement of the auditorium where he had been told a police officer might be able to help. What he found instead was Joe Martin, a white police officer who ran a boxing gym in his spare time. When Cassius declared his intention to whoop whoever had stolen his bike, Martin looked at the skinny, angry 12-year-old and made a suggestion that would change the course of history. "You better learn how to fight before you start challenging people," Martin said, his tone matter-of-fact but not unkind. That simple statement ignited something in Cassius that had been smouldering beneath the surface for years. Here was a chance to channel all the confusion, anger, and desperate need for identity into something concrete, something he could control. Within days, he was spending every afternoon in Martin's gym, learning the fundamentals of boxing with an intensity that surprised even his trainer. But what Martin and the other boxers at the gym didn't know was that Cassius was fighting more than just opponents in the ring. Every punch he threw was aimed at the uncertainty that plagued him, every victory a small step toward understanding who he really was. His natural athleticism, combined with an almost supernatural determination, made him a formidable opponent from the very beginning. His mother watched his boxing career develop with mixed emotions. On one hand, she was proud of her son's achievements and the positive attention they brought to the family. On the other hand, she lived in constant fear that his growing fame would eventually lead to scrutiny that might uncover their carefully guarded secret. She began having nightmares about reporters digging into their family history, about DNA tests that didn't exist yet, but that she somehow feared might be invented. As Cassius's amateur boxing career flourished, winning Golden Gloves championships and eventually earning a spot on the 1960 Olympic team, the pressure on the family intensified. Odessa's health began to deteriorate under the stress of maintaining their secret, while watching her son rise to national prominence. She developed severe anxiety that manifested in physical symptoms, chronic headaches, insomnia, and a nervous condition that required medication. The irony wasn't lost on her that her son's success, the very thing that should have brought her joy, was becoming the source of her greatest fear. Every interview he gave, every photograph that appeared in the newspaper, every moment he spent in the public eye increased the risk that someone might notice what she had spent 18 years trying to hide. Meanwhile, Dr. William Henderson, Cassius's biological father, watched from afar as his secret son achieved greatness. Now in his 60s and nearing retirement, Henderson had built a successful medical practice and raised a legitimate family of his own. But he never stopped following the career of the young boxer who carried his genes. He attended several of Cassius's amateur fights, always sitting in the back, always careful not to be noticed, torn between pride and terror. Henderson had his own family to protect. His wife and 3 children had no idea about his past relationship with Odessa or the existence of his illegitimate son. The social and professional consequences of such a revelation in 1960s Kentucky would have been devastating. Yet he couldn't help but feel a profound connection to the young man who was beginning to capture the world's attention with his skill and charisma. The complexity of this hidden relationship created a web of emotions that none of the parties involved knew how to navigate. Henderson wanted to reach out, to somehow acknowledge his son, but he knew that doing so would destroy multiple lives. Odessa wanted to protect her family's secret, but she also struggled with guilt over denying her son the right to know his true heritage. And Cassius, still unaware of the truth, continued to search for his identity through boxing and an increasingly bold public persona. As the 1960 Olympics approached, the stakes grew higher for everyone involved. Cassius's selection for the US boxing team meant unprecedented media attention and scrutiny. Sports reporters began digging into his background, looking for human interest stories that would make good copy. The Clay family found themselves under a microscope they had never experienced before, and the pressure was becoming unbearable. One evening, just weeks before Cassius was scheduled to leave for Rome, Odessa made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She called Dr. Henderson and arranged to meet him at a small diner on the outskirts of Louisville, far from anywhere they might be recognized. The conversation that took place that night would set in motion a series of events that would ultimately lead to one of the most closely guarded secrets in sports history. "He's going to be famous," she told Henderson, her hands shaking as she stirred her untouched coffee. "Really famous. And when that happens, people are going to start asking questions we can't answer." Henderson nodded, understanding the implications immediately. "What do you want me to do?" "I need you to disappear," she said, the words cutting through the air like a blade. "I need you to promise me that you'll never try to contact him, never try to claim him. I need you to let him go." The pain in Henderson's eyes was unmistakable, but he knew she was right. "And if he ever finds out, if he ever comes looking for answers, then we'll deal with that when it happens," Odessa replied, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. "But for now, for his sake and for all our sakes, this has to end here." They parted that night knowing they would never see each other again, both carrying the weight of a secret that would grow heavier with each passing year as Cassius Clay transformed into Muhammad Ali and became one of the most famous people on earth. The Olympic Games in Rome marked the beginning of Cassius's transformation from a talented amateur boxer to a global phenomenon. His gold medal victory in the light heavyweight division was just the start of a journey that would see him become not just a sports champion, but a cultural icon whose influence extended far beyond the boxing ring. But even as he stood on the podium in Rome, accepting his gold medal with that characteristic smile that would become famous around the world, the secret of his true parentage remained locked away, known only to a handful of people who had sworn to take it to their graves. The young man who would soon shock the world by defeating Sonny Liston and declaring himself the greatest had no idea that his greatest victory might have been simply surviving the complex web of secrets and lies that surrounded his very existence. The return from Rome should have been the happiest moment in the Clay family's life, but instead it marked the beginning of their most dangerous period. Cassius came home with an Olympic gold medal and a professional contract that promised to make him wealthy beyond his wildest dreams. What he also brought home, unknowingly, was the kind of intense media scrutiny that could unravel 18 years of carefully constructed lies. The first sign of trouble came from an unexpected source. A genealogy researcher named Margaret Thornton, working for a Louisville newspaper on a feel-good story about the city's new Olympic hero, began tracing the Clay family lineage for what was supposed to be a simple human interest piece. What she discovered in the county records didn't match the official family narrative, and her questions started making people very nervous. Thornton noticed discrepancies in birth records, gaps in employment history, and most troubling of all, medical records that didn't align with the family's stated background. When she approached Odessa for clarification, the interview that was supposed to last an hour was cut short after 15 minutes, with Odessa claiming sudden illness and refusing to reschedule. "There's something they're not telling me," Thornton confided to her editor. "The timeline doesn't add up, and Mrs. Clay was terrified. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I know when someone is hiding something big." Her editor, more interested in selling newspapers than uncovering family secrets, initially encouraged her to dig deeper. But within a week, he received a phone call that changed everything. The caller identified himself as a representative of certain influential Louisville families who preferred that the Clay family's privacy be respected. The message was clear: drop the story or face consequences that could end Thornton's career. The story was killed, but the damage was already done. Word had gotten out that someone was asking uncomfortable questions about Cassius Clay's background, and that news reached Dr. Henderson through the tight-knit network of Louisville's medical community. The retired physician realized that his promise to Odessa to disappear might not be enough to protect their secret. Henderson made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He began systematically destroying any evidence that could link him to Odessa or her son. Medical records from his private practice that might have shown Odessa as a patient were accidentally damaged in a convenient office flood. Personal correspondence was burned. Even photographs from social gatherings where he and Odessa might have been captured together were carefully removed from albums and destroyed. But Henderson wasn't the only one taking drastic measures. Cassius Sr., who had lived with the burden of raising another man's child for nearly 2 decades, was beginning to crack under the pressure. His drinking, which had been a problem for years, escalated to the point where he was barely functional. He began making cryptic comments to neighbors and friends, hints about family secrets, and things that would shock the world if they ever came to light. Odessa watched her husband's deterioration with growing alarm. She knew that in his current state, fueled by alcohol and resentment, he was capable of revealing everything out of spite or simple carelessness. The woman who had spent 20 years protecting her secret now faced the possibility that the man she had trusted to help her keep it might be the one to destroy them all. The situation reached a crisis point in early 1961, just as Cassius was preparing for his professional debut. Cassius Sr. had been drinking heavily at a local bar when he got into an argument with another patron about his son's future prospects. In his intoxicated state, he began ranting about how nobody knew the real truth about his family, how there were powerful people who had reasons to want his son to succeed. "You think you know Cassius?" he slurred to anyone who would listen. "You don't know nothing. There's blood in that boy that don't come from me, blood that could change everything if the right people found out." Word of his drunken ramblings reached Odessa within hours. She knew she had to act quickly before her husband's loose tongue destroyed everything they had worked to protect. That night, she made the most difficult decision of her life. She contacted a family friend who worked in mental health services and arranged for Cassius Sr. to be quietly committed to a private facility for exhaustion and nervous breakdown. The official story was that the pressure of his son's newfound fame had overwhelmed the simple sign painter, causing a temporary mental collapse. The truth was that Odessa had essentially had her own husband institutionalized to prevent him from revealing their family secret. The guilt of this betrayal would eat away at her for the rest of her life, but she convinced herself it was necessary to protect her son's future. Cassius, focused on his budding professional career and unaware of the family drama swirling around him, accepted the explanation about his father's condition without question. He was busy training, learning the professional boxing business, and developing the flamboyant personality that would make him famous. The young man, who would soon be calling himself the greatest, had no idea that his greatest challenge wasn't in the ring, but in the secrets that surrounded his very existence. Meanwhile, Dr. Henderson was facing his own crisis. His legitimate son, William Jr., had become suspicious of his father's recent behavior. The younger Henderson, now a medical student himself, had noticed his father's sudden interest in destroying old records and his obsessive following of Cassius Clay's career. When he confronted his father about it, the conversation that followed would create another layer of complexity in an already tangled web of secrets. "Dad, I know something's going on," William Jr. said during a tense family dinner. "You've been acting strange ever since that Clay boy won the Olympics, and don't tell me it's just civic pride." Dr. Henderson found himself trapped between his need to protect his secret and his relationship with his legitimate family. In a moment of weakness, he made a partial confession that would have devastating consequences. "There are things about my past, about my medical practice, that I'm not proud of," he admitted. "Things that could hurt this family if they ever came to light." William Jr., being a bright young man studying medicine, began to piece together the implications of his father's words. He started his own investigation, going through old medical journals, patient records that had survived his father's purge, and even interviewing former patients and colleagues. What he discovered was enough to confirm his worst suspicions. The younger Henderson now faced an impossible choice. He could expose his father's secret and destroy his family's reputation, or he could become complicit in covering up what he now knew was a lie that had shaped the life of one of America's most promising young athletes. The decision he made would add yet another person to the growing list of those who knew Muhammad Ali's true parentage. As Cassius's professional career began to take off with a series of impressive victories, the network of people protecting his secret grew more complex and more fragile. Each person who knew the truth became both a guardian and a potential threat. The weight of the secret was beginning to affect everyone involved in ways they hadn't anticipated. Odessa's health continued to deteriorate under the stress. She developed a heart condition that her doctors attributed to anxiety, though they couldn't understand the source of her persistent worry. Her son was successful, healthy, and bringing honor to their family. What could possibly be causing such severe psychological distress? The answer lay in the growing realization that the secret she had worked so hard to protect was becoming more dangerous with each passing day. As Cassius's fame grew, so did the number of people interested in his background. Reporters, biographers, and even government agencies were beginning to take notice of the charismatic young boxer who was making waves both in and out of the ring. The situation became even more complicated when Cassius began his association with the Nation of Islam. His conversion to Islam and his name changed to Muhammad Ali brought a new level of scrutiny from federal authorities who were already suspicious of the organization. FBI files on Ali began to grow thick with surveillance reports, background checks, and investigations into every aspect of his life. What the FBI didn't know was that their investigation was getting dangerously close to uncovering a secret that could have explosive implications. If the truth about Ali's parentage ever came to light, it wouldn't just be a personal scandal. It could become a political weapon in the hands of those who opposed his religious conversion and his increasingly vocal stance against the Vietnam War. The irony was that Ali himself remained completely unaware of the storm swirling around his origins. He was focused on his boxing career, his spiritual journey, and his growing role as a social activist. The man who would soon become famous for his refusal to be inducted into the military had no idea that his very existence was the result of a forbidden relationship that had required its own form of resistance against social norms. As 1964 approached, And Ali prepared for his shocking upset victory over Sonny Liston. The secret that had shaped his life continued to cast shadows over everyone who knew it. Dr. Henderson, now in his 70s, was suffering from the early stages of dementia, causing his family to worry that he might accidentally reveal what he had spent decades hiding. Odessa's heart condition was worsening, and she lived in constant fear that she might die before finding a way to safely pass the burden of the secret to someone else. And Cassius Sr., still confined to the mental health facility, was beginning to show signs of improvement that terrified his wife. As his mind cleared and his resentment grew, she knew it was only a matter of time before he would be released back into the world, carrying with him the power to destroy everything she had sacrificed to protect. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the limits of family loyalty, the price of fame, and the lengths to which people will go to protect the ones they love. Muhammad Ali was about to become the heavyweight champion of the world, but the real fight was just beginning, and it was happening in the shadows, fought by people whose names would never appear in the record books, but whose actions would determine whether one of history's greatest athletes would ever learn the truth about who he really was. Hey, my friends, help me by subscribing to the channel so we can reach 1,000 subscribers, even if you're watching from your TV or computer. Your subscription makes all the difference, and the algorithm will help you see more amazing stories. Leave a like or an emoji in the comments and be part of this growth, and hit that hype button too.